Hi, and welcome back to this Monday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point. The network is AFR Talk. You are listening to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. Now, most of you have had coffee at a Starbucks one time or another. Most of you know that its headquarters are located in Seattle. I've been visiting my son and daughter-in-law there, went to the original Starbucks, the very first one ever in the Seattle area. So, and you are aware that Seattle leans pretty far to the left in its politics. Washington is getting ready. They've legalized same-sex marriage. They're getting ready to order every health insurance company in the state to offer abortion coverage in their health insurance policy. So you know they lean pretty far to the left. And so you won't be surprised to hear about the encounter my next guest had with the CEO of Starbucks, who goes by the name of Howard Schultz. And with us to help us sort all this out is Tom Strobahr. Tom is with the Corporate Morality Action Center and had an opportunity to be at the Starbucks shareholders meeting last Wednesday. Tom, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Brian, it's great to be here.
Well, Tom, tell us about your encounter, your conversation with Howard Schultz. We've got a sound bite, so we'll save that for when we get to the right point in our conversation. But Starbucks has a shareholders meeting last Wednesday, and you, Tom, as a shareholder, you went and had an interesting exchange with Mr. Schultz. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I certainly did. Actually, as a follow-up, I had a talk with him last year at the meeting and came back this year because a couple things had happened. One was actually a year ago, January, that Starbucks said gay marriage was a core value of their company. And that kind of upset me as a shareholder. And it concerned me because, as I reminded Mr. Schultz, there are parts of this world where they're trying to expand where gay marriage is not an issue. It's all but unthinkable in places like China, the Mideast, and certainly large sections of our country. Gay marriage is not exactly the most popular issue. It might be in Seattle, but other more normal parts it is not.
Well, and Tom, you're speaking now as a shareholder here. So you're saying, look, Starbucks doesn't have just a footprint in the Pacific Northwest. Starbucks is a company that's got international designs, international expansion plans. I'm a shareholder. I want the product to do well because I've invested money in the company. And there's a risk there if you make this a core value of the company. You expand this into parts of the world that aren't ready to sign on to gay marriage at all. It could be harmful to the value of the stock in the company.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I cautioned him last year. And unfortunately, the National Organization for Marriage, after the meeting, called for a boycott, and apparently tens of thousands of people agreed not to purchase Starbucks coffee. And as I reminded Mr. Schultz, the very first quarter after this announced boycott, their sales and earnings came in less than what he had predicted. And they also had to go on and say that the sales and earnings for the year were going to be less than what he had suggested. As I said at the meeting, did all that result from the National Organization for Marriage boycott? I said probably not. But did some of it? Yeah, probably so. And the stock value dropped $6 billion. I'm a shareholder. That dropped $6 billion in 2 days. It dropped like $13 billion from its highs. And, that's money that myself and others, it's certainly not in our pocket, and there's no amount of wishing that brings it back. I pointed out that their stock prices actually trailed the S&P 500. And this is in front of literally thousands of his partners and some might describe more as worshipers and other shareholders at this annual meeting.
Well, Tom, let me go back just for a second of this S&P business because we're going to hear in the soundbite that Howard Schultz defends the performance of the stock. But your point is there's more than one way to measure how a stock is doing, and one of those ways is to measure its performance against the Standard & Poor's. And in that metric, Starbucks didn't fare that well.
No, that's right. He mentioned return on equity, and which is not something most people know or understand that well, and I'm sure it did what he said it did. But the common thing is, gee, how much am I up? How much am I down? And how does that relate to the S&P 500? In that sense, as I pointed out to him, hey, from March a year ago to March this year, you're trailing the S&P 500 by 6 percentage points. Now, I didn't dream that up. That's just a simple fact. And He just kind of repeated his 38% number, which of course is a big number, but if anything, it suggests the stock was overvalued a year or so ago. But part of that may be because people are seeing what Starbucks is for, and that certainly is. They are decidedly for gay marriage.
Now let's play this soundbite, Tom. This is your exchange with Howard Schultz. It's about 1 minute and 8 seconds or so, but. This is Howard Schultz responding to the observations that you had made about the value of the stock and its kind of substandard performance, particularly compared to S&P. And you've got a lot of shareholders here. Most of the people in the room, as I understand it, Tom, were actually employees of Starbucks. So you've got sort of a very friendly audience here. And as he kind of lays out kind of the values of the company, you can hear their reaction. And what I want people to listen to very carefully, get to the end of this soundbite, kind of what Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, essentially says to conservative Christians, essentially says to people that believe in the time-honored institution of natural marriage, what they can do with their money. Let's listen. This is Howard Schultz, CEO of Starbucks.
Because not every decision is an economic decision. Despite the fact that you recite statistics that are narrow in time, we did provide a 38% shareholder return over the last year. I don't know how many things you invest in, but I would suspect not many things, companies, products, investments have returned 38% over the last 12 months. Having said that, it is not an economic decision. The lens in which we are making that decision is through the lens of our people. We employ over 200,000 people in this company, and we want to embrace diversity of all kinds. If you feel, respectfully, that you can get a higher return than the 38% you got last year, it's a free country. You can sell your shares in Starbucks and buy shares in other companies. Thank you very much.
Talking here with Tom Strobahr of Corporate Morality Action Center, who raised the question with Howard Schultz that led to that response. And Tom, pretty defiant there. And at the end, again, I just want to reread his exact words. If you feel respectfully that you can get a higher return than the 38% you got last year, it's a free country. You can sell your shares in Starbucks and buy shares in another company. So, I mean, the way I read that, Tom, essentially he's saying to Christians, hey, take your money, take a hike, go buy shares someplace else. We don't want you. We don't want your money.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's saying. I mean, I was raising legitimate business questions and concerns, and his response was, it's really quite unusual for a CEO to tell people, I don't want investors, or I don't like you, I don't like the questions you ask, just go away. And he's really telling Christians or other people who believe in the sanctity of traditional marriage that, we don't want your business, we don't need your business, we have our own gods that we pray to.
It's interesting to me, too, because, Tom, he's very upfront where he says not every decision is an economic decision. Now, if you're a shareholder and you're primarily concerned about return on investment and all that thing, I would just scare me to death that there's something other than what's going to make this a productive, successful business that's driving the decision-making of the CEO.
Right, that's a very astute observation, and that's exactly it. A corporation is, in some sense, amoral. People come together to sell a product or service. We put aside our personal differences, our religious interests, et cetera, to make money, and his job is to make money for shareholders. And it's, every decision of his should be an economic decision. How do we help improve the shareholder value through ethical means, et cetera, and not impose his personal beliefs, his personal ideas on those shareholders, especially if it's going to cost us money, and that was my suggestion that it already has.
It's interesting to me, too. You got to stop and ask yourself the question, if you're an investor in Starbucks, I mean, they exist to sell coffee, and they have a great product. It's good quality coffee and all that. But you got to stop and ask yourself the question, what in the world does two males having sex with each other, what does that have to do with coffee? What does that have to do with a coffee business? And so you start wondering about kind of how this is going to reflect in the business decisions they make in the future. You know, and Tom, I'm just thinking about what he says here. You know, we want to embrace diversity of all kinds, and there was this enthusiastic applause from everybody in the room. We want to embrace diversity of all kinds. And I look at that and I say, Tom, that's a flat-out lie. They're not interested at all in the kind of diversity that you and I represent. If they're really about embracing diversity, then they ought to be welcoming people that support, defend, and promote natural marriage. They're not embracing that at all. They want us to get lost.
That's exactly it. There's really very insulting to anybody who holds a view on marriage different than their own. I mean, you know, again, he's appealing to the private lives of a tiny percentage of his would-be employees. And what's he doing? He's telling consumers who don't agree with him or the corporate stance, go take a hike. We don't need your business. We don't need you as a shareholder. And we're running the business the way we see fit. And if it costs us a few bucks, you know, we're bound to these gods of diversity, but we're certainly not very sensitive to anybody who believes in traditional marriage.
Well, you know, it really seems to me what you've got here with Starbucks and all of these trendy companies that are out there pushing the homosexual agenda is you don't have diversity or anything approximating diversity. What you have is this soul-crushing, dissent-crushing monoversity. You have to agree with our singular view on the issue of homosexual behavior, or there's no room for you here. I would think in the Starbucks chain there, it'd be very difficult to make your way up the ladder of success in Starbucks if you weren't willing to sign on to this crushing monoversity about the whole issue of homosexual behavior. One last question, Tom. Got about 30, 45 seconds. The CEO of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, basically inviting Christians take their money, their shares, their stock, and go buy coffee somewhere else. Do you think a lot of Christians are going to take them up on it?
Well, I certainly think so, and I think it's one way you can kind of put your money where your faith is. There's plenty of places that sell good coffee, and probably for a lot less. So I'd think about it and then maybe find someplace else.
Our guest has been Tom Strobahr of the Corporate Morality Action Center. Getting some attention. The story's up on The Blaze, his confrontation with Howard Schultz of Starbucks. Tom, thanks for taking time to be with us. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you, Brian.
Focal Point, AFR Talk.